Video montage that shows Microsoft founder Bill Gates, a pistol and splattered blood is just one image that Al-Qaeda is featuring in its online propaganda magazine. So the group is telling its followers to kill high-profile U.S. business leaders. The list includes Warren Buffett, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and billionaire brothers Charles and David Koch. For his take on how to fight terrorism and this particular type of propaganda, Scott Mann is with me. He is a retired Green Beret Lieutenant Colonel. Welcome, Lieutenant Colonel. Glad to have you back. How serious is this new kill list?
Well, Deirdre, anytime this comes out, in like an Inspire magazine, which is the magazine of Al-Qaeda, we need to take it seriously. I think probably what concerns me the most is it seems like Al-Qaeda is moving away from their preference for the high-profile, spectacular attacks that define them and more towards the ISIS style of attack. ISIS, they don't like terrorism. They like horrorism, horrific violence on locals to achieve social control. They want you to think they're in your bedroom, in your backyard. And it looks like Al-Qaeda, in order to prove that they're as relevant or more relevant than ISIS, is taking on the same approach.
Well, it's obviously a bad business when you have two terrorist groups competing with each other for which one can be more inhumane. But is there a response that the U.S. government can offer at this point?
Well, the first thing I want to emphasize is you're spot on. That's exactly right. When you have two rival gangs or two groups of thugs that are trying to prove who's the toughest, baddest guy on the block, the people that lose are the people in the neighborhood. In that case, that's the United States and the West. So my response is we've got to open our eyes to the fact that this is how terrorism is trending. It's going to become more localized. We've got to stop calling it lone wolf attacks and ISIS inspired and treating it as what it is, which is Terror 7.0. It's going to affect law enforcement. It's going to become much more local, and we've got to be dialed into that.
It's a great point to make.
Because that's how they're going to do it.
Because that certainly has implications for local police forces and obviously those citizens in particular who were named. I want to ask you, Lieutenant Colonel, about something that was said on Sunday, because National Security Advisor Susan Rice denied that the White House deceived Americans about the nuclear deal with Iran. Here are her comments.
There is nothing that Ben or the president or I or anybody who was involved in explaining the Iran deal to the American public said that wasn't factually correct.
So Rice's words follow a New York Times Magazine profile in which Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes spun a narrative around the deal and the Iranian government in order to sell the deal to the public. So, Lieutenant Colonel, can Susan Rice's statement, I mean, that's Ben Rhodes' boss, right? But can her statement outweigh an admission of deceptive practices?
Well, I don't think it can. I will tell you, Deirdre, I've traveled all over the United States from January until now, from Albuquerque to Boston, doing town hall meetings, talking to moms and grandmothers about what's going on. And when we hear these kinds of false narratives as Americans, especially from the same crew who spun the Benghazi narrative, it's very hard to believe that we're being told, the straight truth here. And in my book, Game Changers, I talk about if we're going to win this war, Deirdre, we're going to have to tell a better story than ISIS. And it starts by the story that we tell to our own people. And I don't see us doing that right now.
That's a great point. That is a great point indeed. Larger picture, where can the U.S. go from here with this nuclear deal with Iran?
Well, I think it's just a bad deal altogether. I would like to see the whole thing scrapped. It's not a good deal. The entire basis for the deal, as we're learning, is a false narrative. So how can this be a well-structured deal or something that's in the United States' best interest? Iran continues to foment instability in Yemen and Syria and other places. It's a bad deal. I'll tell you where we can go. We can scrap this thing and start looking at them as an enemy of the state, which they are.
And one of the most damning parts of that report is that even Ben Rhodes, apparently, according to these documents in the New York Times, purported that Iran's government was more moderate than, in fact, it was. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for the time. Glad you're here. Scott Mann with me there.